So, you have the setup, but how do you use it? Hey everybody, welcome back. This is episode 2. Last episode we talked a little bit about how to get started on your setup on a budget. And I thought this time would be a good idea to show you guys how to record something. And I thought the best thing to start with is vocals, because most people, when they get something like this, whether it's music or not, usually vocals will be the thing that they're recording. Podcast or a gaming channel or something like that. So I think the first thing you need to think about is what kind of microphone you're actually going to use for this. Now, if you're going off the setup that we talked about earlier, you only have one microphone, and that's a large diaphragm condenser microphone, which is a great choice for vocals in a studio or bedroom environment, because it's nice and sensitive. It picks up all the nuances of your voice. A dynamic microphone is less sensitive, but it'll do the job for most cases. But if you have the money and you've already got one, you may as well just use a condenser microphone. That's the one I'm going to be using today. The next thing you have to think about is the polar pattern of your microphone. Most microphones that you get will either only have cardioid polar patterns, or they'll have cardioid as its main polar pattern and then backup polar patterns to switch over to. A polar pattern is just the way the microphone picks up sound. The most common is cardioid, and that is basically where it only picks up mostly from the front. It'll kind of pick up in like a heart shape like this. This is the most common polar pattern you can get. Any microphone that doesn't have switchable polar patterns comes with this one. I'll talk about the pros and cons of it when I actually have the mic sitting up, ready to record. Another thing I'd like to talk about is where in the room you record. If you're doing a gaming thing or a podcast, you're going to be limited to where you're sitting. But if you are recording music, if your room isn't treated, and by that I mean if your room doesn't have foam paneling up to absorb reflections in the room that you don't want, you want as dry a sound as possible when you're recording vocals so that you have control over it later, I'd recommend smack bang in the middle of the room, and preferably a room with a bed or some kind of furniture to absorb some of that sound. The reason I say the middle is so you're as far away from all the walls as possible, so if there are reflections, you're sort of as far away from them as possible to start you off with. But yeah, so I'm in my bedroom right now, and this is where I usually record, so I'm going to set it up right now so you guys can sort of see what it looks like. Right, so we have it set up in a pretty decent position for recording vocals. When it comes to distance away from the microphone, for these kind of microphones, if you have a cardioid condenser microphone, I would recommend 8 inches to a foot away. Reason for that is, again, it's a very sensitive microphone, and if you can hear this, when I get closer to the microphone, it gets lower, or it exaggerates the bass frequencies a little bit. The reason for that is this microphone, because of its polar pattern and because it rejects sound out the back of it, the closer you get to it, it causes something called the proximity effect. Basically it just exaggerates the bass frequencies in your voice. A lot of people use this for movie trailer voices, or if they want their voice just to sound a little bit bassier. That's great for what it is. If you're going to be recording vocals for a song and you want as clear a sound as possible and something isn't going to be difficult to mix later on, I would recommend just doing it this way. Just because it sounds clearer, sounds more balanced. But this is the way I like to do it. Now, the next thing you have to think about is when it gets to the interface. With this kind of microphone, you need power. I've mentioned this in my last video. Cardioid condenser microphones, any condenser microphones that you use, need phantom power. Phantom power is 48 volts of power coming from your interface or desk or whatever you're using. It's really simple. there's probably a singular button that says 48V plus, 48V, 48 plus on there. All you do is press that button. That's it. You just press that button. It'll send power. You'll probably see a wee clip on your software or interface, and that will show you that your mic has gotten power. Pretty simple, and you'll start getting signal. Go to your interface, check into it. So check 1, 2 at a level that you think you'll be talking or singing at. So if you're singing, you do a couple of vocal runs. I'm not going to do any now, but do a couple of vocal runs, do a few little things that you'll be, or just sing what you're going to be singing. That's the best way to do it. Just sound the way you will when you're actually recording, and then use the light that's on there. If you have one, it usually will just be a little LED light that will be green when it starts to get signal, and then red when it starts to clip. You don't want to clip in a digital domain, trust me. It sounds terrible. Try not to clip, but also try and get a decent enough signal, because if you have too quiet a signal and you start processing afterwards, you can get a bit of noise in there. Depending on the quality of your microphone, you can get a lot of noise in there. If you find that that LED light isn't enough detail to see how much gain you're getting, try going onto your DAW or software, going onto the track that you're recording onto, and pressing the monitor button. This is usually indicated by a little speaker icon. This turns on the meter, the dB meter that is, and it gives you a more accurate readout of what you're recording and how close you are to getting to that clip. If after you've recorded you realize there are a few clips here and there, like little tiny things, you don't need to worry about that too much, because it's not that noticeable when there's a whole mix going on of sound. And even when it's on its own, it's kind of difficult. When it's just little things that are hitting in those transients. A loud part of the take, it just has like a little clip. That's fine. Don't worry about that. Don't re-record everything after the fact just because of a couple of clips. But if there is like sort of if there's anything over a couple of milliseconds long of just a big clip, redo it. Trust me, you will be happy that you redid it. So that's gain staging. Another little thing I want to talk about was monitoring tricks. So when you're hearing yourself back, for people who haven't done this before or are new to it, it'll sound a bit weird. It'll be hard to sing the way you normally sing when you have headphones on, listening back to a mix through them when you have most of your elements recorded. And I would recommend getting most of your elements recorded before you start recording vocals. Your final vocal take, that is. It can be a little bit daunting when you hear all that stuff going on and you can hear yourself back through a microphone in there. The first thing I would recommend is make sure that your level is well suited to the music, which is a little bit louder than the music is. Now, on my interface, there's actually a way of mixing between the dry signal you're getting from your microphone and what's coming out of the computer from the software. That's a really easy way to do it. You just turn them, knob whatever way you want. If you want this to be louder, if you want the song to be louder, and that'll balance it for you. If you don't have that option, if you have a smaller interface like this one, which doesn't do that, a good way to do it is to turn up or down the master fader on your software, and then turn the headphone knob up or down, whatever way you need it to go. Another good way of helping you out and making you feel a bit more comfortable is to add reverb. Not too much, but add a little room reverb to get rid of that dryness, because a lot of people aren't used to hearing themselves completely dry, and the microphone does sound a lot drier than just standing in the room with your ears picking up everything. So try your best to add a light bit of reverb on to your vocal track, and it just gives it a bit more sense of space and makes you feel more like you're in a room and not recording like a really dry vocal track. So that's a really good way. I like to call it vanity reverb. It just makes you sound better in your own head. Even though you don't sound any different, you'll sound exactly the same. It might just help your performance a little bit more and make you feel more comfortable, more confident when you're recording. And that's another thing I want to talk about. This is probably the last thing I'm going to talk about, is kind of act as your own producer when you're recording vocals and other instruments on your own. I feel the biggest I feel the biggest problem with a lot of home recordings, and the reason they don't sound as professional as they could, is not just because, you know, their equipment isn't any good, or they're a bad musician. That's most likely not the case. I think it's just because they don't think enough about how they perform in themselves, because it's a lot easier when you have somebody else there to tell you, oh, maybe you should try this, maybe you should do this. And sometimes when you're on your own, you can kind of lose a little bit of inspiration when you're doing it for a long period of time. You're just there like, oh, that'll do. Try, when you're listening back, to think about what you like and dislike about it, you know, just about whatever take you done. It will sound better if you actually really criticize what you love and what you hate about certain tracks, and then just go in and fix them. Like if it's a faster song, try and add grit and, you know, try and add grit and power into it, you know, try and, you know, move around dynamically. And always at the end, I would always recommend this to anyone who's doing this on their own, always have a take at the end of your vocal session where you just go nuts and do whatever you want, and don't care if your voice cracks or if you sound really stupid or weird. Do a weird track at the end, because 9 times out of 10, if you record something like that for a 4-minute long song, somewhere in there is going to be something really good that you didn't expect to get out of yourself, and you can add that into the song as either, you know, a harmony track, as the main vocal track itself, or a weird effect that you can put in the background, you know, after affecting it, or you can use it for anything, and it gets more out of you than you expected that you could. I would recommend doing that. It's a really cool thing to try and do, and it's always fun to try and experiment and get new sounds out of yourself, and try and find things that make you a little bit different to everyone else, and try and find your own sound, which I think is the most fun part of music. But I think that's everything you guys need to get started, at least. There will be more videos on this kind of thing, recording other instruments, and even other types of media if you guys want. So guys, I think that's me. So just enjoy yourself, don't take it too seriously, and you'll end up with something usable. So if you want to say something, leave a comment. If you liked it, leave a like, and subscribe if you have the time. I think I'll see you in the next one. Bye.